The rise of professional rugby in the nation's capital is here, but the road to glory has only just begun. This is the Road to Glory podcast, home for all Old Glory DC faithful, talking all things rugby in the DC region and beyond. Now your host, Ryan Yee, Gavin Hickey, Trinidad Bavio, Roland Pratt, and Farrah Douglas.
Welcome to the Road to Glory podcast, the official podcast of your Old Glory DC, talking all things rugby in the capital region and beyond. I'm your host, Ryan Yee, and of course, with me, as always, Gavin Hickey, Roland Pratt, Farrah Douglas, and we got a new face here on the show. She was so good in our last episode when we brought her on, and we decided to make her more of a regular thing here, bringing on Trinidad Bavio as well as part of the Road to Glory podcast team. So excited to have her as part of our show going forward. But all of you, Old Glory DC might have been on bye this weekend, but it was definitely no shortage of rugby excitement throughout the weekend this past week.
Absolutely. I think it was unbelievable to see Super Rugby back, which is incredibly exciting. That, and of course, be remiss to not mention Six Nations. So Ireland's still on track, the only undefeated team, 3-0. And of course, a bit of a stalemate with Wales and England, what's going on in Wales. But what about the France-Scotland game? Roly, what do you reckon?
What a game. What a game. That was it literally had everything. You had the two red cards early. You had the French taking a lead. You had the Scots making a mad. It's a copyright, comeback from the Scots again. Just passion and flair, attacking from everywhere. They just came up short in the end, and probably rightly so. I think France were on the day for a little bit more composed, but it just makes for great television. I was just lying, eating or drinking my coffee, watching this,
sure.
Spectacular. Yeah, I was a little early.
It's early, yeah. But what do you reckon about the two reds? It's a terrible thing to say, but I was kind of happy to see, not for him. I think it was a stupid what Mohamed Moises did. Terrible kind of leading with the head into the Scottish scrum half in Ben White. But, it was, you hate to see a player get a red card, but it was good for the spectacle that the second player, Grant Gilchrist, obviously getting the red card earlier, it kind of even things up a little bit. Well,
it's kind of my personal I have a vendetta against the red card in rugby right now because I've seen what the 20-minute rule can do in MLR. And I think it's a fair thing. I would almost go back to like ice hockey where you have, 5 for fighting. It doesn't matter what you do, but you got to level up the teams at the after a certain point, or otherwise it's just going to simply be a blowout. Teams have figured out quickly how to play against 14 men, and it's really hard, especially if you get a red card early. You haven't a hope generally at the highest level. We've seen games in semifinals of the World Cup be spoiled by it. And, I think it's not fair. Trini, I'll let you go in here and see what do you think of this?
You guys are talking about the France and Scotland. I thought that Scotland would suffer a catastrophe from France in those 3 minutes, because when the red card was granted to Gilchrist, I thought it was going to be a catastrophe, because when France is on your 22 and it's attacking, it may be a try. It might be a try, because when it's on a good day, France can be very harmful. But as you said, when we thought that 14 against 14 is going to be like a difficult game, it was awesome. I loved it. The Six Nations, it never lets you down. As you said, Ireland is going straight, doesn't matter who is playing. So that is a good thing, looking forward to the World Cup. And I was a little bit disappointed on the Wales-England game because of the game. I thought it was going to be more exciting, but we know the background about Wales. Also excited by the Super Rugby matches. Surprised by the Blues win. Oh my God, 60 points on the first round is a lot. And also, of course, looking a lot of the Super Rugby Americas, Segland going strong. We'll talk about American Raptors, of course, but I'm pretty excited because the rugby is coming alive, and that's exciting.
Yeah. Farrah, what about you? Anything excites you over the weekend here? I know Old Glory DC was off, but there's so much going on.
Oh my God, there's too much going on. I have more games that I was like, felt like I was going to be excited about. And then I was like, man, what happened? Crusaders.
Yep.
Kind of crushed my soul a little.
I love it. I love it. Keep it coming. I love it. I'm a big Chiefs guy. I will take it.
Not okay. It's not okay. And I thought the England-Wales game was interesting. Owen Farrell, like his kicking, like in general right now, is percentage is really low, which is kind of surprising. I think he definitely missed some opportunity in the game to really kind of galvanize them to get a momentum shift going forward. Ireland is just really exciting right now. They're no doubt are going to grand slam it.
Wow.
Wait.
The non-Irish person on this show says the biggest thing about Ireland.
Actually,
That's it.
Farrah, would you
my mom is English and Irish, so that's
do you know what though, Farrah? It's interesting because Irish people have a real uncomfortable time being considered the best. It doesn't sit well with us at all, ever. And it's something we're not used to. And now I think the Irish rugby team is slowly starting to accept the idea of being the best in the world. And I think we're going to see something really positive happen from that.
Well, and the interesting, I think, is if their mindset's not right going into their match against Scotland, that's where they can get tripped up.
No. Well, I mean, all in all, I think all through all of that, I think it's pretty clear that, yeah, it was a pretty exciting weekend. Obviously, Six Nations is not disappointing. I love Super Rugby, and to have that in full swing now is a lot of awesome stuff. And of course, Super Rugby Americas as well. But we do have MLR in full swing as well. And it has been a lot of fun after these first 2 weeks. Got a jam-packed episode. We're going to break down, obviously, Old Glory not having a match this weekend, but we're going to talk about some of the top headlines that came out of this week too, that I think will have some sort of impact, especially as Old Glory approaches their week 3 matchup against Rugby New York this weekend. And then also we are excited to be joined by Old Glory DC GM Marcelo Blanco as well, who's going to get into a little bit of insight about his goals for this team and the excitement that's involved with this franchise in his first year kind of at the helm for this club. So a lot of super exciting stuff in this episode. If you aren't already, make sure you're giving us a follow at Old Glory DC as well. Give us a like, subscribe. We're on YouTube, anywhere you get podcasts. It's been a super fun journey over the first few weeks with these fellow teammates of mine here on the Road to Glory podcast. That's been super fun, and we're gonna keep it rolling. But yeah, let's start talking about the MLR here, guys. Obviously, the big news before we get into the actual matches of week 2 was the big announcement of the stepping down of the commissioner of the MLR, George Killebrew. He's obviously stepping down from that lead role, and he's now going to be replaced by former deputy commissioner Nick Benson. You may have heard his name, COO for the Utah Warriors. Yeah, big stuff. Obviously, that means big changes will be coming for the MLR. It's going to be interesting to see how he approaches the whole league as opposed to George Killebrew. But before we get into these matches, guys, just your overall thoughts about this big shift only 2 weeks into this 2023 season.
Do you reckon Killebrew's done a good job?
It's a good question. Roland, what do you think?
I think he has under the circumstances. He had to navigate several major storms. I think the biggest being the Gilchrist crisis
and COVID.
And COVID are absolutely actually, you know what? COVID's even bigger. So, you know, he got a fledgling league through COVID. No small task. Remember, XFL canceled their seasons and just went under and then came back after. MLR were able to pay their players. I think he's done a lot, but it probably was the right time for him now to take a step back and bring in another, new set of eyes, some new ideas, and try to kick on again. And I think that this is a process that should continue to happen over the next, several years, where people will continue to step up with new ideas.
And I mean, talking about some of those new ideas, what do you think are those next steps in terms of what the MLR needs right now as it continues to make that next step as a prominent rugby space in this rugby landscape? What is it that needs to be done that Nick Benson should be aiming for, should be trying to get done moving forward here as he tries to take those next steps?
Ooh.
It's an interesting one because it's like Gavin said, it's a crucial time right now, right? I feel like we're on the precipice where the MLR is really making those steps, and it really just needs to make that next big leap. I feel like it has done a lot of growth over the past years under Killebrew, but it just needs that kind of next kick to kind of make that next big hop into the rugby world.
Just Roly, you said there just you'd like to see a bit of a turnover. Do you not think the next 8 years are so critical in our development that we need one leadership, one voice before a World Cup, or would you like to see MLR turn over a little bit?
No, I do mean bring it through the next cycle, but I mean after that, I'm talking long term. I'm hoping that Nick will stay in the job to see through that whole cycle of 8 years, hopefully, and then for another fresh face to come in with new bright ideas to continue on the journey. I don't think it's going to be done for. I mean, we'll always go back to sort of MLS because we remember it as a fledgling league in our own memories. So when it started, it was very, very small and continued on as now growing into $1 billion industry. So obviously,
USA 94.
Oh, there you go. Ray Houghton, man.
Yeah, against Italy. Giant stadium. Yeah, there you go.
See, two rugby heads still can bond over soccer,
That's what successful World Cup does to you.
Anything is possible, indeed. I guess. Anything is possible. But it should be obviously interesting times here. Obviously, under now the leadership of Nick Benson, it'll be interesting to see the steps that are taken by the MLR. And obviously, a lot of that will be looking towards the future with World Cup stuff in mind. But again, let's take a step back here and start talking about the season here and week 2, because we do have matches being played while all of this crazy stuff is going on. So I'm going to go around the room here and just talk about kind of the headlines coming out. Like I said, Old Glory DC on bye, having the chance to kind of rest up after that wicked of an opening matchup there to start the season. So I'll start with you, Gav, in terms of what you think you saw in terms of the MLR and the matches there. What really stood out to you?
Well, there's two things that are really standing out, I think, already. Now, it's only 2 games in, but I think you're starting to see some teams out of the blocks really quickly, starting to set their stall out. And if they can maintain the momentum, I see these teams being very difficult to beat. What we're also seeing is that home games matter. There's only 2 teams who've lost home games so far this year. That's NOLA and Dallas. And I would be a bit fearful for both the way they started the season. So home games matter. We saw that with Old Glory. And we see, again, this kind of league of contenders coming out. Houston, Old Glory, certainly. New York, even though they had lost that first round. San Diego, of course, and Seattle. So I think they're the pack that's starting to emerge out of the conference this season.
How about you, Farrah? What really stuck out to you this weekend in round 2 of the MLR?
I think Gavin kind of nailed a lot of it on the head. I think the teams who can hold momentum in a game and capitalize when those momentum shifts, those opportunities are happening, like in live play, and utilize them to kind of like catapult themselves forward or kind of change what's happening in the game, and the teams that are able to do it. And you're seeing a separation of the pack. And I'll get to that when we talk more specific about the games that we looked at.
Yeah.
But I think you're seeing the teams are spreading. They're kind of spreading apart with. I think we can probably talk about who our stronger teams are and who's going to probably spend a little bit more time sitting at the bottom.
Yeah. And Trini, I know you're kind of diving here into this MLR space now. So for you now, 2 weeks in, now seeing the second round of stuff, what's really kind of caught your eye here in the MLR?
First of all, not only the teams that can maintain that famous momentum that you're talking about, but also looking at San Diego Legion, Houston Sabercats, and the Seattle Seawolves. When you have 2 wins in a row, even though you're just in the second round, it's pretty amazing that you start with the right foot. Of course, when you are the home team, that you win your home game, it's amazing. But it's it's like shocking to me that when it's round 2 and you guys can see like 2 groups of teams that can already spread, that's what catches my attention, because I know you can have a good start and maybe fall down and do the opposite, but how about this second round? And you can see that teams have a lot of difference on their level. It can depend on the preseason, it can depend on the players, but that catches my attention because there's a really big difference with some teams.
You're spot on with that, Trini, but as you know, it's a long season and it's going to become a war of attrition at some stage, and whoever has the best reserves at the moment or can stay injury free are going to come to the fore at some stage.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention that. I mean, Jama mentioned it last week in an interview, right? He clearly is aware that this is a season that is going to be basically, I think what he said was the last like team standing, you know what I mean? Who was able to get through that grueling of a MLR campaign. So it definitely is not dictated by these 2 weeks, but it is interesting to see a separation becoming evident. Whether that's going to hold, I'm not too sure, but it does feel like there is something happening here. And obviously saving the best for last, Roly, for you out of round 2.
From a club perspective, I've really liked Seattle's defense. I've really liked, there's a few clubs right now that have actually learned how to play defense, which I've got to say hasn't been the case years gone by. So really liking to see, guys getting on the line and holding that line and that defensive spread and all the things that come with that. But I've got one other small thing of note, taking it from a slightly different angle. I've been really impressed with the standard of the refereeing, actually, but also the mic'd up referees is a huge change from someone sitting at home watching the game. We can now go through the process with the referee, just like in the Six Nations, and it makes me hate some of them a lot less, because at least I see them going through the process. And while I may not agree with the final outcome, at least I can agree that they went through the process and that's what they came to. So I'm looking at you, Derek
agree
Summers.
with the process? Roly, do you agree with the process?
Generally, I'm old school. The head issue right now is really bothersome to me. What's going on in England, having to tackle below the waist, this is really bothering me. So there's definitely things that are going on within the framework of the laws that are just bothersome to me, and I think that needs to be addressed. But generally speaking, from the laws that we currently have and the mandates that the referees are being given in MLR, I'm currently enjoying the game way more.
Yeah, no, the transparency has been huge. I mean, that's something I've always envied about bigger leagues around the world. Like you mentioned, Roly Six Nations, Super Rugby, I feel like does a really good job at that and being able to see that process. And I think on top of that, the educative kind of side of things too, for newer fans who may not understand, the game as well as your kind of expert, I guess, quote unquote, rugby fan. I think it's helpful for them too, as well, especially with a brand new league that is trying to attract new fans as well. And it is cool to kind of see that implemented in MLR. And I think just speaks to the growth of that. The way that the league has been growing as well to introduce.
Speaking that. of referees, I think one of the things I enjoyed watching was Kat's game and listening to her mic'd up and just kind of how she just so very calmly managed that game, and it was pretty physical. You could see the front row kind of looking at her every time she had to have a little chat with them. Gavin, we've been there.
Farrah, Navy has Kat as a referee against Cal and Army this spring. Kat's the greatest referee in the world.
I'll leave it at that. I'll say about the weekend that I saw was, and I gave Roly a little bit of a text in our group chat as well. And we'll get into it more in our prediction segment. But all I said was, I am never going to second guess San Diego again. They have proven to me that they are somewhat of a real deal. So that just goes into kind of the two teams that have really shocked me is the impressiveness that San Diego has shown early, I think, out of week 2. And then also just the disappointment that I think NOLA has shown is kind of something that's kind of taken taken me off guard as well, which kind of alludes me now to our last little part here as we wrap up this first block is, and we'll just go rapid fire here, guys, is out of now the 2 weeks. I know we say it's very early, but who to you is the team to beat right now? Because I think, as you're saying, there are teams that are starting to separate itself. But I think when you kind of compare those top teams, it's very close. I mean, there are some teams that kind of showing that are showing a little bit more. But I think on any given week, out of those top teams, it's tough to kind of choose between. I think that's evident with some of these matchups when we have our prediction segment. It's so difficult to choose between them. So, I mean, I'll start with you, Gav. Who do you think is at the top of the league right now and is the team to beat?
You can say Seattle, you can say San Diego. They certainly had a blistering start. New York, I think, are very dangerous, even though they had a loss. But I'm going to go out there, and I'll stand over this. Old Glory's gone 1-0. Let's see what we're made of. Let's see, let's go 2-0 against New York. So I think the team to really watch out for, I'm hoping we can build on week one, is Old Glory. And I mean that sincerely.
Yeah. Farrah?
Oh, man, why'd you have to pick me after that? Oh. San Diego.
I mean, yeah, it's fair. Yeah, they looked really, really good in that match.
I underestimated them myself.
Me too.
And yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you, Gavin, but I feel like based on what is in front of my face right now, what I have watched and rewatched and paused, I'm going to say San Diego, but it's a long season.
Do they have the depth? That's why I just think Old Glory are a little bit different. I think this year we actually have serious depth.
I mean, I think that I think the season is going to come down to, I think, depth and what program wins the recovery.
What about you, Roly?
I would say over the last 2 weeks, the best performance of any team in one game has been the Old Glory team in that first game. I think that's the best performance of the season to date, period, end of story. But I will say this, over the 2 weeks, I think the team that's impressed me the most over 2 games is Seattle. I think that the seawall is back. I think that they've built on what they achieved last year and they've gotten better. I think that they have a pretty good system in place and they're led by Rickard Hatting, who just seems to just keep scoring and doing all kinds of awesome 8-man stuff that, you know, he just leads from the front in every single game. So they have a talisman as well, and they have a history of winning up there. So I'll give it to them currently, but OG is right there.
All right, Trini, what about you? 2 weeks into the MLR, the deep dive, what do you got?
2 weeks and only one game of Old Glory, but you guys were talking in the last episode about this bye week. Oh my God, you have this momentum that we were talking about. And I think it's coming a good time, you know, because you can see the other teams. How are they playing? We started well. What can we perform better? And you can see the game and you can practice on that. And you have a very important match because you're playing the last champion, but the last champion started losing with Seattle. I'm going to go with Seattle because, you know, it was a majority. Farrah, I don't want to leave you alone, but I know that you're winning in the predictions. So I have to go back up the guys. But the thing is, I think the Old Glory team has very good players and they had a good start. And for me, that's one of the most important things in a team.
You know, that's interesting. I mean, that's a really good point, Trini, that I don't know if it works in Old Glory's favor or not, but Old Glory has 2 games of New York to study, whereas New York has 1 game of Old Glory to study. Is that a good thing? Hopefully.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. I always err on the side of it's very tough. I mean, when you have other teams that you've been able to see twice, at least from a prediction standpoint, in terms of putting your money where your mouth is, in terms of saying who's the team to beat, it's always tough. But yeah, it's hard to put aside that opening Old Glory DC performance, I gotta say. But we'll definitely find out. We finally made it through. I'm sure fans are excited we made it through. We got through the bye week, and we got some rugby coming up this weekend that they'll be able to look forward to watch. Gavin, you kind of alluded to it. Rugby New York is coming, the Old Glory DC is traveling to New York to take take on the former champions, and should be a lot of exciting stuff. And we are going to break that all down in a little bit of time. But first, after the break, we do have Old Glory DC GM Marcelo Blanco joining the show. Going to be super exciting stuff to talk with him, breakdown of what his expectations are with his club in his first year at the helm for Old Glory DC. Going to be super exciting stuff. So we'll have a chat with him right after a short break. But first, with dozens of TVs and speakers at each table, Glory Days Grill is the best place to watch your favorite rugby team. Wings, burgers, fresh salmon, delicious salads, sandwiches, and even cartoons for the kids. Locations all over the DMV. Find us at glorydaysgrill.com. The Road to Glory podcast. We'll be right back.
Experience how sous vide is reimagined the way we eat from the company trusted by the most renowned chefs in the world. Visit cuisinesolutions.com or your local retailer to get a taste.
Knowledge. It's where innovation begins. It's what leads us to discovery and motivates us to succeed. It's why we ask the tough questions and what leads us to the answers. At Leidos, we're standing behind those working to improve the world's health, safety, and efficiency. Leidos.
Are you looking for an exciting and unforgettable live sporting event? Look no further than Old Glory DC, your hometown Major League Rugby franchise. Don't miss out on this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see professional rugby up close. With a mix of strength, skill, and strategy, rugby is a sport like no other. Whether you're coming alone, with friends, or looking for unique family entertainment, Old Glory DC has something for everyone. Be a part of this unique experience. Get your tickets now at oldglorydc.com. That's oldglorydc.com.
Shift into Easy Drive at Sheehy and discover an easier way to find your next vehicle. Sheehy Easy Drive works harder to get you a better value when you sell or trade in, find you more options within your area, and offers you one easy price. Buy in store or online, so you can focus more on where you need to go, not how you'll get there. For an easy answer to your car needs, shift into Easy Drive at Sheehy.
It's easy at Sheehy. Sheehy.com.
Pro rugby in the nation's capital is here. Are you on board the road to glory? Back to upping the flags with your hosts Ryan Yee, Gavin Hickey, Trinidad Bavio, Roland Pratt, and Farrah Douglas.
Welcome back to the Road to Glory podcast, the official podcast for the Old Glory DC. And I am so excited to be joined by a very special guest for this week's episode, Old Glory DC GM Marcelo Blanco. Marcelo, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today, a little bit about your franchise here and your first crack at it.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. We're very excited and looking forward to a great season.
Awesome. And you know what, let's just get started right off the get-go here. Pretty simple question to start off. We'll start easy to begin with, and then we'll get to the hard hitters. But first, just, initial thoughts on how the Old Glory DC has opened in 2023. Obviously, that first week, what a shocker it was for so many Old Glory DC fans out there to be able to see this side come out of the gate so fast in a very, very good performance to start off the season. So just kind of your initial thoughts on the open to that season and how it appears that you guys are really bouncing back from what was a disappointing 2022.
Well, I think that what you guys saw, and the fans saw on the pitch, on the previous Saturday was a result not only for rugby preparation, but rather, a community effort from a front office together with a coaching staff and a great roster. I'm convinced, and I will repeat this to the end of my life, that there's no success if you don't develop, on the pitch and off the pitch. And the two things need to work together. And we didn't start, the week before, we didn't start it on January 2nd. This is an organization that reset it, itself on August 1st. And since then, we have been working towards, delivering a great season to the fans because we listened to them. And the criticism was harsh, was very much right for them to say so, but we had a terrible season, the previous one. So we really need to reset it and rebuild ourselves.
Great. welcome to DC.
Thanks,
so as
Farrah.
their first big hire for Old Glory heading into the 2023 season, to right the ship, so to speak, did you feel any pressure coming into the franchise, or were you excited for the challenge that was laid before you?
When you're doing something that is your true passion and you're privileged to do, there's no pressure whatsoever. No pressure, with all due respect, is the people that don't have to eat at the end of the month. Pressure is the daddy that is single and needs to feed seriously 6 children. That is, I'm privileged to have a tremendous ownership. I have people that trust me, and they just give me the confidence to perform. Trini knows me well. I'm passionate to perform. It's all about me, and I think that this is a pleasure to do.
Marcelo, you mentioned passion there, and I'm intrigued by this. I want to ask you something about Argentinians and passion, but before I do, there's a number of Argentinians coming into the league this year, and it's probably, I think it's safe to say, enhancing the league as a whole. But what do you think, in your words, do Argentinians bring to Major League Rugby?
I think that is great. I mean, Major League Rugby, the purpose at the end of the day should be to develop domestic players, okay? In this transition, I believe that the addition of international players brings a lot to the table because they can teach, other players to develop. In terms of Argentina, I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm personally don't like, the coexistence of a South American league and an MLR league. I think it should be a unified path for players to come, within the same geography zone, if you want to call it that way. But I think the MLR is tremendous market. I mean, the growth is there. When you talk to the people from World Rugby, and again, I don't want to get into politics. This is facts. Basically, the growth of the game is in the Americas. I mean, there's certain saturation in terms of growth, when it comes to Europe, and other regions of West developed countries.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I mean, it's funny that rugby is probably most famous, most associated with New Zealand, and it's only a small population, so it's a tough one for World Rugby. But that's just me thinking out loud there. But you mentioned just about the passion that Argentinians do bring. What makes, I mean, you talk about the Americas and the growing rugby. Argentina has been the most successful Americas country since time began, and they've qualified for World Cup since 1987 every year. And obviously, you see some teams this year that didn't, which is disheartening. But what makes Argentinians so unbelievably passionate about their country that's different from everybody else? Maybe
that
Italians
is a great question. I tell you the main difference that I see, and again, I'm being extremely respectful, for this country, which I personally love. In Argentina, you have rugby players, and the challenge is for us to make them athletes. In the US, you have athletes, and the challenge is to make them rugby players. So when a kid is born, with my grandfather, my father, all play rugby. So basically you start at 2 years old with a rugby ball, and the passion is there, it's either soccer or rugby or maybe another sports, but it is within your blood, look at Trini, I play against Trini's dad, for example, so basically there's so much passion that emanates out of our blood, our system. So we're enjoying this, for some of the athletes here, yeah, maybe it's another way, to compete or another professionalism. But Argentina is the club. Also, don't forget that it's all amateur club level in Argentina. There's no professionalism in Argentina. So when you look, I'm sure you would ask me eventually about the guys that I brought from Argentina, but some of them, this is the very first time they're dealing with professionalism. So basically, they're just bringing all the customs that they have, with amateur club level, and they're enjoying that,
That's incredible, and I'm sure we will get to those players in just a moment, Marcelo. Sure. But we do know the connection between OGDC and Scottish rugby. How has your involvement with Scottish rugby in the past helped prepare you for the Old Glory GM job?
Well, thank you. I think that is a great question. And sometimes, when people ask me this, I'm happy to say that it's a privilege to me, to be associated with Scotland, but it's also very much sadness in my heart that I cannot be associated to Argentina. And the reason for that being is because, in my opinion, Scotland And the Scottish Rugby Union is the top most professional rugby union there is in the world. And I'm not talking about the quality they develop on the field, because it's up to, up to par with anybody, but in terms of the organization, I've been advising, I've been working for the Scottish Rugby Union for the last 3 years now, directly as a consultant for the Americas. And I tell you, they run it like a top corporation, like a top private sector corporation, and you can see the results on the field. And Scotland is the only top tier rugby union with a direct investment in the MLR. And I think that they did it for a reason, because they see the growth in this country and they see the potential monetization of that investment. And I think it makes a lot of sense.
Now it's my turn, because I know, Marcelo, that you have a career in business. So how has that helped you prepare for running a sports franchise?
Well, I tell you, I've been saying, since I used to work in Wall Street, that to me, there's a direct parallelism between athletes, high-performance athletes, and athletes in the financial world. At the end of the day, the difference is that we don't get hit, we don't get the physical blows, but the adrenaline is there, the competition is there, the preparation is there, the mental challenges are there. And at the end of the day, we're not selling 80 minutes of rugby to our fans. We're selling entertainment. And for us, the 1 hour before, the 2 hours after, and that is the entire package. And you need financial background, you need a sports background. And I think that, is that previous experience helps me a lot,
Absolutely. And again, we're talking here with Old Glory DC GM here on the Rent Ditmar Bring It Home interview. Marcelo, you talked about the journey beginning, I guess, in August 1st, and it's been, a whole build up to this point, and then obviously your involvement now with this squad. In terms of that time frame and leading up to this point, what has really been, in your opinion, your biggest challenge so far as you've taken over this role as the GM position for Old Glory DC?
And the challenge was evidence to everybody that was at Segra the other day. We had a tremendous team playing on the field, but when you look at the bleachers, they were empty. And that is my biggest challenge. I mean, my challenge is to fill that stadium. I want to see that stadium like the Boca Junior Stadium is in Argentina, with people jumping up and down on the bleachers, people celebrating a try, people cheering defense. I mean, look at, the Six Nations. You see 68,000 people watching a rugby game. There's nothing more spectacular than listening to the Flower of Scotland on the, or the French national anthem. And you go to Segra and we get 2,000 people. I'm going to go to New York, this Sunday, we want to play against New York, the former champion. I wish we can set 10,000 people, 15,000, but you know what? We may be able to sell 3,000. So that is the biggest challenge for any GM, to sell tickets.
I'm thinking that you probably already answered this immediately right there, because I think that those may well be your immediate goals with the club, is to get, like we try to say in Ireland, butts on seats. But also, let me try and have you think forward for a little bit. What do you have a goal with the team for in the 3 to 5 year period? Where do you see the team being and developing? What are your dreams going forward?
Well, I'm not going to lie to you, Roland. I think that, MLR needs to be sustainable. And for the MLR to be sustainable is every single team has to be generating revenues and not to generate a deficit, okay? And we are still at the early stage. And so we definitely need to get butts on the seat. So that is a challenge. Where do I see going forward is that, we truly have, rosters with, domestic players, fully developed rosters, with at least the capacity to choose, that if we want to have 35 players from the US. And my personal dream will be to have, and again, some people say, oh, he's getting into politics. Again, guys, I'm not a politician, okay? I'm about all rugby. And if you open me up, I have a rugby ball instead of a heart, okay? So, but basically my goal is to have the MLR working together with USA Rugby and have the US compete with the top 10 nations in the world, because unfortunately, I'm going to go to France and my heart, is extremely happy because Argentina is going to be there. And I guarantee you, we may repeat, soccer and rugby. You never know. But I would like to see the USA team, and the USA team has the quality material to be there, but for certain reasons it's not there. So the challenge is to make a program sustainable for the US to be a permanent guest of every single World Cup.
So Argentina against USA, you'll be up for USA, right?
No way. No way.
Too easy.
Sorry, that was easy.
I was going to say that because Argentinian people are like this, and I'm looking forward to this last question, Marcelo. What do you think the new players can bring to the squad? Because you know a lot of them, and how do they play a role in achieving those goals that you have for Old Glory?
Well, I tell you, Trini, that for me it was a little easy because I usually love to talk to the players. I'm like a fatherly figure to most players, that I like to talk to. But the first goal was bring good people to the team. I didn't care about, if they were great players. I want to make sure that first, they're truly good people. Number one. Number two, I think that each of them brings different set of, qualities to the table. And so far, the results are great. Plus also, we have guys that I was able to discover, 3 guys that are US players. I mean, because Fermin Martinez, Alejo Dero, and Marcos Young are US qualified. I tell you, the way Fermin Martinez played the first game, hello, Scott Lawrence, take a look at him. I mean, no, seriously. It's true. I mean, the guy, was a machine in defense. You tell me with the size that he's got, that he's not huge, but the heart of that guy, I want that guy in my team every single day. So please, Scott Lawrence, give him a call. And basically, that is what I'm trying to do. Basically, recruit people, but first, great people, And that is. But let me tell you a story about Argentina, USA, Ryan, that you're going to laugh at it. When Scotland went to Argentina, and Trini was a witness of this, I made the mistake to dress with a Scottish uniform. Because I was a kid man, I was a team manager for Scotland, I was doing everything. And Scotland defeated Argentina on that one. I went out with a little grin on my face, and the Pumas made me pay for it. So I learned my lesson.
Yeah, so when Gavin asked you that question here the second time between US and Argentina, there's no way that you're making that same mistake again, I guess, eh?
No, you will not see me with a US flag in my shoulders.
That's lesson learned.
That is funny. But Marcelo, I mean, we appreciate the time. I mean, a lot of insight there. And of course, I think a lot of fans, Gold Glory fans including, will be happy to hear kind of the passion that obviously you bring to this side, and obviously the goals that you have for this Old Glory DC side as well, because I think that's what a lot of Old Glory DC fans are excited for, is the future of this squad, and especially coming after a massive matchup in that first week. I think it's all up from here, and I think there's a lot of optimism that's brewing around the club right now, and I think what you've said here is going to just excite them even more. So again, Marcelo, thank you so much for joining us. Really do appreciate your time, and we'll definitely talk to you in the very near future.
My pleasure, guys. Anytime. I appreciate what you're doing for the club. And something, let me say this again, if any fan has any concern, please reach out to the organization. We're here to listen to our fans. We're here to deliver the best product ever. And hopefully we're successful, but you know what? We may not be successful, but at least we will try hard.
No, that's awesome. Again, that is Old Glory DC GM Marcelo Blanco as part of the Rent Ditmar Bringing It Home interview. Marcelo, thank you again, and we'll be back right after a short break. But first, the St. James is the premier sports wellness and entertainment destination in the country. A first-class training facility makes the first-class teams. Old Glory DC is proud to call the St. James our official performance training partner. Be your best at the St. James. The Old Glory podcast will be right back.
At MedStar Health, we're doing everything we can to prepare for what if. Like, what if you need care right now? We have the region's largest network of urgent care centers. Or what if you think you're out of options? Patients continue to turn to us after losing hope elsewhere. Or what if you can't get to care? Our mobile care units bring care to our communities, because treating people means being prepared to treat them when what if happens. MedStar Health. It's how we treat people.
pro rugby in the nation's capital is here. Are you on board the road to glory? Back to upping the flags with your hosts, Ryan Yee, Gavin Hickey, Trinidad Bavio, Roland Pratt, and Farrah Douglas.
Welcome back to the Road to Glory podcast. Ryan Yee, Gavin Hickey, Farrah Douglas, Roland Pratt, and Trinidad Bavio. Just wrapped up an awesome conversation with Old Glory DC GM Marcelo Blanco, giving us a lot of insight into his goals moving forward at the head of this ship as Old Glory tries to turn things around here and really take off and move forward as this franchise continues to grow. But now, like we said earlier in the show, we made it through the bye week. It's now game time for this Old Glory DC team this weekend. They're taking on the former MLR champions in the New York Ironworkers away in Mount Vernon in New York. Obviously, that game is going to be broadcasted on Masson. So let's get right into a breakdown. Obviously, New York coming off of a pretty big win against the Toronto Arrows, made a pretty big statement. I would say maybe a little bit of a rougher start for this New York team. I mentioned to you guys during the break that I'm really not as confident with this New York Ironworkers team that I would have thought 2 weeks into this season, being the former MLR champions, but nonetheless, a pretty winning pretty easily there against a struggling Toronto Arrows side. So before we kind of get into the Old Glory DC side of things, guys, let's talk about this New York Ironworkers team and what really Old Glory needs to be worried for as they take the trip to New York.
Well, worried, I'm going to flip that on its head. There's something that I think that we're probably giving them a little bit too much respect as current champions. Yeah, they were really good last year. It's a different team this year, but more importantly, I think Marty Veal, who led them over the last prior 3 years, he's moved on, and they have James Semple in now. So, I kind of fancy New York a little bit. I do like the nickname, the Ironworkers, but we saw the first week at Seattle, they struggled a little bit. They had a good home win, but I don't know. I think we're paying them a little bit too much credit with that champions title, even though it is deserved, because I think they're a very different team this year.
Agreed. I think against San Diego, they sort of fell apart with pressure. Their set pieces were poor. And it really, execution, like just their skill execution, basics, handling, being able to connecting with their pass, their ball control and contact, body height and contact, all the like little controllable things that are at this level of the game makes such a huge difference, because it's just like the skill execution, and you expect from the former champion for it to be a little bit more crisp. And being a set piece coach myself, I was very disappointed in their scrum, but really excited for Old Glory, because our scrum is amazing, and they just could not get their line out sorted out, either hooker. Their set piece game and their execution of skills, to me, leave lots and lots of opportunities for us to capitalize this coming match.
Farrah, you've upset me by blaming the hooker for the lineouts.
I think Nate Breakley can probably take a little bit of fault there as well. I don't. Again, like you said, Gavin, I don't think that Old Glory need to be in any way terribly concerned about the game. I don't think we need to give them any respect necessarily. But that being said, I think if we can hold them on the defensive line, New York like to play a style that's quite abrasive, and if we can't defend those important channels, especially down 13 and out to the winger, their wingers, they love to charge forward. So we've got to control Coe and Fido, who are two of the biggest ball carriers in all of MLR in the first 2 weeks, which is stunning to me considering they're both wingers. But it goes to show the style of play that New York are attempting, bashing it up and then getting that ball out as quickly as possible to those strike runners who do a fantastic job. And Fido especially is a major threat, but I've loved the way Coe has played for the last couple of years here. So again, if we can hold them down, keep the defensive line in good shape during the game, I still back our boys to score points against New York without, and I think we'll win this game.
Just on that point, Roly, it's an interesting one, right? Because We're talking about them going wide to their wingers. And, you know, the season's going to tell how good Chicago are or are not this first season for them, right? So we don't know how our result compares so far to Chicago compared to the rest of the league, right? But one question we may still have is our defense, because we conceded a fairly considerable amount of points, 26, 27 points against Chicago. So what'll be very interesting to see is if you're saying that New York like to go wide to their wingers who are explosive players, can we shut them down defensively? I think that's going to be very, very telling this weekend.
And I guess that's a pretty good segue into kind of now looking at Old Glory DC side of things. Now, what they need to do in terms of to really solidify a victory here coming out of their second match of the season in round 3. For you guys, obviously, everything can be said about that first match and coming out of the gate. Obviously, we had the discussion last week about how this bye kind of plays into that, whether that kills the momentum, whether or not it's something that they can play to their advantage, using that extra week to, like you said earlier, Gavin, to get that extra set of film, have that advantage of Rugby New York. Old Glory DC only haven't played so far one match. So for you guys, I guess, what is kind of Old Glory's kind of blueprint in terms of now coming away with the victory against Rugby New York? Trini, I'll start off with you. What do you think that Old Glory DC needs to do to come out with a W here this weekend?
First of all, I would like to change the question that you said a couple of minutes ago. Is it that New York is the last champion and you respect New York as a team, but is it that Old Glory has got better and you've seen a better team of Old Glory that can also beat New York? Because New York didn't have a good start. You said they lost their first match and they won Toronto, but let's say Toronto is not playing well this season. We are going to repeat it all over the show. It's just round 2, but they didn't have the start maybe that as a defending champion you had, this season. But I said, as I heard Farrah said that the set pieces are going to be very important. And during the break, we were talking about Ramiro Herrera that may possibly be in this team. And I think it's going to be very important because of the experience, because of the scrumming that we've seen a very good scrum in the other match of Old Glory. So I think it's going to be interesting. And also the defense, as you said, because even though Chicago may seem as a inferior team as of Old Glory. So I think that's going to be something to carry about during the match. But I think Old Glory is going to be good because, as you said, Gavin, they've seen two matches of New York this season, and Old Glory has seen what they can do and what that they can improve.
You're spot on, but I also think you hit the nail on the head there, Trinity. I think selection is going to be really interesting this weekend. We see Corey Daniel back. He's going to add some value. We see Herrera. I mean, where do you put him after such a dominant performance in the last 3 games, including our 2 warm-up games? So it's going to be very interesting to see, do they go with a recognized 9 on the bench? Do they not? Do they go 6-2? Do they go 5-3? I think that's going to be really interesting to see how selection goes this week.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Hey, Roly, anything that you have in terms of keys that Old Glory needs to do in terms of coming away with the victory here this weekend?
I think we've pretty much covered it all there. It'll be an interesting selection. Definitely all season long, we're going to have this one question. What's the selection going to be? We've got the visa issue. We've got such depth in the squad. There's going to be guys vying for positions. Who the heck thought that our draft picks were going to be so good? All of these questions. So many positives to go along with the 1 or 2 negatives. But you're going to be quite liking Coach Sims's job right now, to be honest. He's got some good problems ahead of him. So I hope they can go up and do the job in New York.
I hope we're not getting too far ahead of ourselves, Roly, and we'll see after this weekend. But, Jama said last week that selection was very predictable last year. And now you just said we're going to have this conversation every week this year, which is really exciting. If that's the case, it shows that Old Glory has changed completely from last year. And that in itself is massively exciting.
Yeah.
Gavin, you said it's the inner competition. If you don't have someone that is playing for the same spot as you don't have that eager to get better,
Funny.
And I think this is going to happen in Old Glory, that it's a very good thing.
You're spot on.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's exactly what Jama mentioned last episode. He feels like, you know, nothing is solidified. It doesn't matter how long you've been part of the team. Doesn't matter how much you've been solidified yourself in the lineup. You're always pushing each other in terms of trying to keep that starting position. I think that competitiveness can only do wonders for a team that's really trying to take those next steps. So it should be really interesting. Yeah, well, coming up here, we now put the chips on the table, and that's going to include this week, finally, an Old Glory DC matchup versus New York Ironworkers here. We're going to predict that match and two other big-time matches that are coming up in round 3. It's the prediction segment that everyone loves. A couple people are moving a little bit ahead here in the prediction segment standings. A couple of us trailing a little bit behind. But it's okay. Like we said, still early in the season, lots of time. I like to think that it's a long journey ahead with that too. So we'll have our prediction segment coming up here right after a quick break. But first, we got to mention Old Glory DC is excited to welcome back our friends at the Supply Room, your business to business office supply vendor located in the Mid-Atlantic. Visit thesupplyroom.com to learn how to create a smarter office. The Road to Glory podcast will be right back.
Knowledge. It's where innovation begins. It's what leads us to discovery and motivates us to succeed. It's why we ask the tough questions and what leads us to the answers. At Leidos, we're standing behind those working to improve the world's health, safety, and efficiency. Leidos.
Are you looking for an exciting and unforgettable live sporting event? Look no further than Old Glory DC, your hometown Major League Rugby franchise. Don't miss out on this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see professional rugby up close. With a mix of strength, skill, and strategy, rugby is a sport like no other. Whether you're coming alone, with friends, or looking for unique family entertainment, Old Glory DC has something for everyone. Be a part of this unique experience. Get your tickets now at oldglorydc.com. That's oldglorydc.com.
Pro rugby in the nation's capital is here. Are you on board the road to glory? Back to upping the flags with your hosts Ryan Yee, Gavin Hickey, Trinidad Bavio, Roland Pratt, and Farrah Douglas.
Welcome back to the Road to Glory podcast, the official podcast for your Old Glory DC. Ryan Yee, Gavin Hickey, Roland Pratt, Farrah Douglas, and Trinidad Bavio. And it's obviously the segment that you all have been waiting for, our prediction segment that we do each and every week. It's been a lot of fun so far, or not so much fun for some of us, a couple of us breaking away, but we now are adding another competitor to the mix here. Trinity, you are now going to be part of this game that we're playing. We have decided in our first episode that it's going to be some sort of dinner accommodation, and maybe, as Roly says, a pint may be added there as well of your choosing. I want to figure out how we're going to sort this. We were talking before the break, and Gav said that you know what, let's just restart. And of course, him and I being at the bottom of the table here, that's convenient
for you.
It is very convenient for us as Roly and Farrah start to pull away a little bit, but I don't think I'm too worried here. But maybe we'll go winning percentage here at the end of the season. We'll figure something out. But nonetheless, we will have a victor at the end of the season. Before we get into the 3 big time matchups, though, that we are talking about in this week's prediction segment, obviously going to include the Old Glory DC matchup versus the New York Ironworkers. I got a little of a side prediction here for our Navy men's head coach, Gavin Hickey, who I have found out is playing somehow going to connect with my alma mater in good old Western Ontario in Canada. The Western University Mustangs are coming to Annapolis to play at the Brigade Sports Complex this weekend, March 4th on Saturday. Obviously, I'm going to know the answer, but Gavin, obviously, you're going to come away with the victory there this weekend against my alma mater. It's tough to hear from me.
The 4th big matchup of the weekend is, Navy Western. It's going to be a great game. Looking forward to it. A bit of history there between the two teams. First time we played together in a while, but you know who I'm backing all the way. Listen, we got this covered. Do you reckon Western had a chance against us?
You got me between in a rock and a hard place, because obviously I got to say my alma mater is gonna be victorious here this weekend, but
-1 for you next week. That's all right.
Yeah, sure. But when you're taking on the number 1 ranked team in the U.S., it's hard to be confident in that answer. But nonetheless, gonna be a fun match to watch there. But when I did find that out, I thought that was super exciting stuff, and super excited for the Western Mustangs to take on some pretty solid U.S. talent here down here stateside. So that should be a lot of fun. But let's get into it. Like I said, 5-1 for Farrah Douglas, 5-1 for Roland Pratt after going perfect. Roly, you went with San Diego, the only one that sided with San Diego. I told you I'm never going to second guess that team again. And they are also again in this prediction segment, so that might say something. Farrah, you did drop that one. New England Free Jacks and San Diego allowing Roly to come back in the game, but nonetheless, we'll see whether or not you can break away here. And then Gav, like we said, you and I here sitting at the bottom, and I can see why you want me to get the -1 there with my alma mater by including that fourth big match this weekend. But let's get into it. We got 3 big matches. Obviously, we're going to be predicting OGDC versus New York, but I'm also throwing in there Chicago taking on Utah in Chicago, and then in their first home opening matchup of their franchise's history. And then we got Houston Sabercats taking on the San Diego Legion. So we'll save the best for last with Old Glory and New York. So let's start off with Chicago and Utah. Let's quickly go around the room. Gavin, I'll actually no. We can't let the guys at the bottom first. We have to let the top with. You know what, Roly, you went perfect last episode, so we're gonna start off with you 3-0 to put you on the spot. Chicago, Utah in Chicago. Who you got?
Interesting one here. I am actually going to go with the home team here, the new guys, Chicago. I think just an extra week under the belt. I think that there's good players there, a little bit more continuity with a very excited home Chicago crowd who've wanted professional rugby in the city for so long. Give me Chicago in this one. Also, Utah haven't impressed me all that much.
All right, Farrah, I got to call on you next. You're the other 5-1 predictor here. So who you got? Chicago, Utah.
I'm going to go with Chicago. They've got 2 games worth to see what Utah's doing. They had this weekend off. So, and the same thing, I'm far more impressed with the potential there than I am with Utah.
All right. And Trini, I'll save you for last because you are the newcomer. So I'll give you a little bit of time here to make that pick. But Gav, I'll throw it at you. Chicago or Utah?
Oh, safety numbers I said earlier. Chicago can score. They scored 26, 27 points in their first ever game against Free Jacks. That's no mean feat. So I'm going to have to lean towards Chicago winning at home this weekend.
All right, Trini, you're up.
I'm going to go with Utah. I'm starting strong. I want that point. I'm going to go with Utah. Sure.
There you go. The point that Gav made for me makes this decision a little bit tough is the whole home side thing, because I do think there is something to be said about home teams having a big advantage to start off this season. But that being said, some insider knowledge, I did see that the Chicago Hounds spent their bye week a little bit differently. I saw a lot of them on vacation just 2 weeks or into their second week. So I don't know, how that kind of plays into that. It's interesting that they didn't spend, I guess, the entire week, practicing, but nonetheless, I think I'll side with Trini here. And it seemed to work for Roly last week, kind of going against the status quo. So I'll go with Utah in this one. Let's shift now to what should be a pretty exciting matchup. I might even say outside of maybe New York and Old Glory, probably the second most exciting matchup of the weekend. Houston, undefeated. San Diego, undefeated after 2 weeks of play. Roly, again, I'll throw it to you. Who do you got in this matchup?
This is a big battle here. I'm liking what the South African tandem of Human and Mayer have done in Houston, but I can't go against San Diego, guys. They're very good to me last week, and I think that team has the ability to travel. Give me San Diego, and a bit of I think it might be an upset. I'm not sure.
Yeah, Farrah, what about you?
I underestimated San Diego last weekend, so I will be choosing San Diego. It's going to be a physical match. Both of those teams, they're like the physicality that they brought against the opposition was pretty massive. So it definitely is going to be an exciting, hard fought match, but I'm going to go with San Diego.
I feel like we're all making amends this week after San Diego hurt us in the predictions last week. Gavin, you, Houston or San Diego?
I'm actually trying to look up here the schedule. I wonder what time it's at. It's not going to make much of a difference. It won't make much of a difference time zone wise, but
3 o'clock Eastern time on Sunday.
3 o'clock Eastern. Okay. Home field advantage does matter. But I agree with what you're saying there, Roly, about Human and Henneke Mayer. I think they're doing a good job. But this San Diego team could be on a bit of a roll this year. And Danny Lee's second year in charge, I think they're looking pretty strong. So I'm going to go with San Diego.
All right, Trini, are you going to keep it a clean sweep here with San Diego?
Yeah, I'm going to confess something because I knew that you were going to do this section. So I chose my teams for the next round. And I chose the Houston team. So I'm going to go with Houston. I don't know what's going on, guys. I hope that I'm wrong but I'm going with Houston this time.
I did say at the start of the show in our first block that I was not going to second guess this San Diego team anymore. So I think I do need to hedge my bets here and make those amends that I fell short from last week. So I got to go with San Diego. I've been a big fan of this Houston SaberCats team, and I think they've made huge improvements from last year. But I mean, after watching that matchup with San Diego Legion and New England, it's hard to bet against the San Diego side, even as they travel to Houston. So I'll go with San Diego in this one too. All right. Well, the match everyone's been waiting for here, Old Glory DC taking on the New York Ironworkers. Going to be a super exciting one at Mount Vernon in New York. So Old Glory is away. And again, that game is going to be played on Masson for all of us local fans to watch. Roly, I'll start off with you here. Old Glory DC taking on New York. It's going to be a fun one.
I already said it. I'm taking the whole our boys. Old Glory all the way.
All right. Farrah, how about you?
Old Glory. Art set pieces.
Easy. Gav?
Yeah, listen, 1-0, hit the ground running. Herrera to come in, Corey Daniel to come back. Feeling pretty good about Old Glory these days. So Old Glory are going to go on the road and they're going to beat New York.
All right, Trini, what about you?
I cannot say New York. It's my first entire show. I know I'm choosing another team, but I'm feeling so good about Old Glory that I'm going to get on that ship, and I'm with you guys.
you were this close. You were this close to going against every single pick on your first show, and I was going to have so much respect for you. But nonetheless, I think the fans will love that you're going with Old Glory DC as well. I mean, I got to side with Old Glory DC. I think the biggest thing that stuck out to me was, Farrah, your point about the set piece. And I think coming out of that Toronto matchup and seeing the way that New York struggled in that way, I think Old Glory DC can really take advantage in that standpoint, and that's going to be a massive impact here. So another week of clean sweeps of Old Glory DC. It's going to be interesting when that first week comes, when we feel that we've got to shift over. But hey, this is the Road to Glory podcast, so it is fitting that we are all supporting, especially with a big win against the Chicago Hounds in that first week and having an extra bye of rest. So super fun stuff. We'll see whether or not Gavin and I are able to catch up a little bit. It looks like it's going to be that Chicago Hounds Utah Warriors one that's going to be the decider here to get us closer to that steak dinner and that side of a pint of beer. But we'll see.
Well, I'm going to be 1 point ahead of you regardless.
Well, we'll see about that too. Now you're building up my confidence, and now I got to spend the next few days. Maybe I'll wear this lucky Western jersey behind me just to make it going. But yeah, that's gonna be super fun stuff. And again, that matchup between Navy and Western is at 2 p.m. In Annapolis at the Brigade Sports Complex. So lots of fun rugby happening this week. Again, Old Glory DC back in action. In case that our fans didn't know, the next time that they will be home will be against the Toronto Arrows. I believe coming up in a couple weeks time, or just upcoming next week, March 18th. So if you want to get tickets for that, make sure you're going to oldglorydc.com and to book that up, because we want to pack Segra Field. You heard Marcelo Blanco. He wants fans to come out and as Roly said, put butts in seats, or I should say, as the Irish say, put butts in seats and go out there and really make the atmosphere one deserving of how this Old Glory DC team is playing. So it's going to be super fun stuff, but they'll have to get through New York first this weekend. All right. Well, that will wrap up this third episode of the Road to Glory podcast. Again, just super excited to be joined with these awesome team members of mine here with this show. We've been having a lot of fun here with the first few episodes, and thank you to all our viewers and listeners here, or if you're listening on the podcast or if you're watching on YouTube. We've had great support here to start off this new revamped version of the Road to Glory podcast. Make sure you throw us a like, subscribe down below as well. And we've had a lot of fun bringing you the latest in rugby when it comes to Old Glory DC. It's been a lot of fun. So until then, we'll be back next Tuesday with the Road to Glory podcast. Trinidad Bavio, Roland Pratt, Gavin Hickey, Farrah Douglas, I'm Ryan Yee, and we'll be back next week.
You've been listening to the Road to Glory podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything Old Glory DC and beyond. From expert team analysis to exclusive interviews and more, you'll always find it right here. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, find us on social media at Old Glory DC. Catch you next time on the Road to Glory podcast.